Hello, my name is Abid Ahmed. I'm in section SC2 and I'll be going over the yield strength of materials. In order to understand the yield strength of materials, you need to understand stress and strain. Stress is the force applied to a material per cross-sectional area, and strain is the deformation or displacement of that material that results from an applied stress most of the time. Although both of these are usually in correlation, one can occur without the other. For example, strain can occur without stress by increasing the surrounding temperature of an object. If you increase the surrounding temperature of an object, it goes through thermal expansion, and without applying stress, strain can occur. The object deforms. In the same way, stress can occur without strain by clamping down on that object as you increase the temperature. So in essence, the thermal extension wants to create strain, but if you clamp down on it, then stress will hold that object together. In many ways, this relationship between stress and strain can be depicted using a stress-strain diagram. So the diagram would represent strain on the x-axis and stress on the y-axis. So for example, for low-carbon steel, they will make this diagram by placing it inside a tensile testing machine, and they'll record the deformation of the steel as the tensile stress is being exerted by the machine, and the tensile stresses are taken into account by the tensile testing machine. So 3 important points on this diagram: yield point, ultimate strength, and failure. So what happens in this diagram is that in the beginning, stress and strain have a linear relationship. As more stress is placed on the object, more strain of the object occurs. However, after a certain point, which is called the yield point, strain increases substantially with little or no increase in stress. So in essence, the object will deform substantially while the stress remains constant. In many ways, this material becomes very like plastic, like molding clay. So once steel has reached its yield point, it becomes much harder and won't be deformable unless it reaches this yield stress. This process is known as stress hardening. So in many cases, what happens is people will put incredible amounts of stress on the object so it reaches this yield stress, and then after that the crystals realign in the steel so that the object becomes much more hard and much more harder to exert strain on it. Although further stress can be achieved from this point, objects are usually stressed until their yield point, because after this point massive deformation needs to occur for further hardening. This further stress is called the ultimate strength. So further increases in stress will result in taking the object to its ultimate strength. This is the point where it reaches its maximum tensile strength. And once this point is reached, if further stress is placed on the object, then failure will begin to occur. So what happens with failure is, since the crystals begin to disintegrate, the stress it needs to put further strain on the object will begin to decrease. And what's showing here is that the crystals are beginning to break apart from each other, and the object won't be able to hold itself together. And that's what happens with failure. The object eventually ultimately breaks apart, which is failure. So in conclusion, stress and strain are both very important concepts related to structural objects. Both of these can be related on a stress-strain diagram. As stress increases, strain increases linearly until the yield point has been reached, and then after this point, strain increases as stress remains constant. After significant strain, further stresses need to be added to reach the ultimate strength of the object, and once reaching this point, the object's failure begins to occur.